Welcome to today's episode of Dear Jane. We're very excited about the conversation we'll be having today. Before we jump in, you need to know about an awesome marketing company that can help you if you are a pro-life company, pro-life organization, whether you need to raise funds to make your mission possible, whether you need to get the word out to more people, whether you need to recruit volunteers. If any of those are needs of yours, Choose Life Marketing can help. They are experts at reaching the abortion-determined woman, abortion-minded women, connecting you with donors, and so they'd be happy to work with you. Check them out online, www.chooselifemarketing.com. Today's episode of Dear Jane is going to be very interesting. We're joined by Trevor Polo. Trevor, thanks for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to kind of dive in. I have a list of questions that I've come up with based on some of the work that you do. But before we do that, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got caught up in the pro-life movement?
Yeah, it's interesting because, 10, 15 years ago, if you told me that I was going to be heavily involved in the pro-life movement like I am now, I probably wouldn't have believed you. I was a pro-choice college student at Michigan State University at the time, studying political science, wanted to go to law school. I probably would have described myself as a, conservative-leaning, socially liberal college student, like a lot of the college students that we talk to are. But I actually was taking classes from a pro-choice professor who opened my eyes for the first time to a pro-life argument. He was obviously presenting it in a pro-choice way to try to debunk it, but it was the first time that I ever heard a reasonable defense of the pro-life position. And from there, I just started learning more about what abortion is. And then finally, the first time I ever witnessed what an abortion was, the reality of abortion, through images and video, my heart just really broke from it. And ever since then, I've been unable to go back. And since then, my wife was the first employee at Protect Life Michigan. And since then, I've been working with them to help expand our reach on college campuses, in particular in the state of Michigan, and change hearts and minds and ultimately save lives through outreach to college campuses and to the larger community. Our strategy is really to couple effective apologetics with powerful imagery and storytelling to change hearts and minds on the issue of abortion.
That's awesome. So you encountered this argument that was intended to be debunked. What was it about that and your journey that caused you to make that about face? Can you share some more of those specifics?
Yeah, I think it was really diving in for the first time beyond just the bumper sticker kind of slogans that we hear around the abortion issue, whether it's on the pro-life and pro-choice side. On the pro-choice side, I felt like, things like keep abortion safe, legal, or rare, or my body, my choice, or very agreeable statements like that. They appealed to me because I wanted to be moderate. I wanted to be a reasonable person. I didn't want to be an extreme on either side. But the first time I actually had to defend a pro-choice position, I couldn't come to terms with how I could justify the legal killing of another human being when I would normally never be able to justify that in any other situations. It seemed like I was making an exception that I couldn't back up with any scientific evidence or any philosophical evidence. And it really was like a mental change for me at first, that then was followed by a heart change when I really was later exposed to, like I said, to actual images of abortion, and didn't then just see it as some obscure, far away issue, but one that was impacting real human beings every single day and treating them with violence that I couldn't ignore, or couldn't turn away from any longer and hide behind those bumper stickers or euphemisms or whatever.
Yeah, it's really easy to regurgitate bumper stickers or slogans or sound bites until then you actually have to defend it and say more than that. So you do a lot of work with young people today to help equip them to have these types of conversations. What are some of the biggest holdups even that pro-life people have? Or maybe what are some of the questions that they're most afraid of encountering from pro-choice people?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest holdups in general that aren't related to actual questions would just be the fear of going out and doing a really hard thing. Our organization, our purpose is to go out and do activism and do outreach, which means we go out and we try to talk to pro-choice college students every single day in the state of Michigan. And that can be very nerve-wracking, very scary for some of these kids. Some of these kids have never talked to anyone that's pro-choice in their whole life until they stepped onto a college campus, right? And we're asking them to go out and do that intentionally. And it does come with, a backlash. You're going to potentially lose some friends. You're going to potentially be in awkward situations in classrooms. You're going to potentially be yelled at or called names or whatever it might be. So we're trying to get people out there to do that and just overcome some of that fear. But people also have a fear or nervousness that they aren't ready. They don't feel like they're equipped. They don't know the right answers. What if someone brings up this biological argument? What if someone brings up this difficult circumstance? What if someone brings up X, Y, and Z? All these varied things that we might hear about people talking about related to the issue of abortion. So that they're like, well, I want to go do something, but I'm just not ready yet. I'm not equipped yet. I don't know enough of the right answers. So if I go out and do this now, I might actually do a disservice to the pro-life movement. And I think my biggest encouragement to people would just be that I promise you know more than 99% of the pro-choice people that you're going to talk to. No one really talks about abortion as much as pro-life people do. So you're going to know more than they do. And even if you mess up, even if you say something that's kind of silly or you say something incorrect, or you get kind of stumped for a second by something someone says, it happens to everyone. But I promise you that is always going to be the better than the alternative, which is silence. If we don't go out and do anything and we're silent in the face of this injustice, then there absolutely will be continued killing of unborn children. But if we go out and try and we go out and start conversing and we go out and start having those conversations, then we can at least limit and reduce the killing, if not eliminate it altogether.
Yeah. As I think about conversations that I have with people, it's very rare that they know how to go beyond their own talking points. So as
Right.
soon as you start asking more of those questions, I even was at a conservative political event over the weekend and was talking with someone who would put themselves in the conservative category, but was articulating more of a pro-choice stance than you would expect. And even having conversations with this gentleman, I was surprised for the bold claims that he was making. He didn't have a lot of substance to back it up. And so I think that has encouraged me, not that you want to go out there and be gotcha or anything like that, but just knowing like they probably, even if they don't feel like it, they're probably as ill-equipped as maybe you feel.
Yeah.
But I totally agree. Just going out there, and the more conversations you have, the more comfortable you'll have
Yeah, and I
doing
would
them.
even just say like it's surprisingly easy to change someone's mind on this issue. We just did an outreach or two outreaches this past week, and we changed over 50% of the pro-choice students' minds that we talked to. And some of those conversations were as simple as like a three-sentence exchange with them. They have never heard the pro-life position, so if we can articulate the pro-life position in a persuasive way, and couple that with effective storytelling and images and things like that, then we can change minds on the spot of pro-choice students that can then turn around and change or save lives as a result of that. It's unbelievably easy to do. Not that there aren't difficult ones at the same time, but more often than not, it's a very easy conversation that we're having with people.
Yeah, that brings up one of the things I wanted to ask you about today, which is how you go about changing people's minds. You are part of a group that advocates for using abortion victim imagery. Can you explain what that is, and explain how you've seen it be effective? Because I know a lot of even pro-life people are very nervous about using imagery. So can you
Yeah.
kind of pitch it to us? Tell us how you've seen it be effective.
Yeah, I think when we talk about why we use victim imagery, there's really three main reasons or three main like justifications that we have for using it. One is we have anecdotal evidence of lives that were saved. We have there was a partner group that we work with that was doing outreach down in Florida, and they were doing outreach, and this woman came up to them and was very upset, was yelling, screaming, calling them names, saying they shouldn't be out using these images, all kinds of stuff. They came back the next year. They go every year on spring break and do this outreach. They came back the following year, and another girl came up to them and said, "Hey, my friend was here last year, and she was upset with you. She's yelling, screaming, calling you names, all those things. But a few months later, she got pregnant. And when she got pregnant, she remembered the images that she saw, and she chose life for her unborn child, even though she still disagrees with everything that you believe in. So like there's examples, we have countless examples of lives that were saved. We have examples of people that work for us now that were pro-choice, saw an image, became pro-life, and now have dedicated their life to the pro-life movement. But we also have a historical justification for the use of victim imagery. And if we look at just about every successful social reform movement in the history of humanity, they've used images of victims to communicate their message. So we think about the ending of the slave trade in the British Empire by William Wilberforce. He didn't have photography, obviously, at that point, but he had the ability to have artists do renditions of what these Africans looked like chained up in these ships, or what a slave looks like when he's chained up, and there's the iconic image of "Am I not a man? Am I not a brother?" He even like would bring these wealthy aristocrats onto ships for like parties, political parties, and he'd have the ship pull right up to a slave ship so that they'd have to hear and see and smell the conditions that the slaves were enduring. We look at child labor, how child labor in the United States was ended was by Lewis Hine, who went to factories and took pictures of kids with blistered and broken hands and covered in dirt and soot, and published those in newspapers that caused an outrage in the public. We look at the civil rights movement. Emmett Till was a young black man who was accused of whistling at a white woman in the American South and was brutally beaten and lynched and shoved into a river. And his mother had an open casket for him against the advice and against the common sense of everyone around her, because she wanted the world to see what happened to her little boy. And as a result, Rosa Parks saw that image and chose not to get up when she was asked to on the bus several years later. And it's things like that this historical case, even animal rights. We think about animal abuse and the way images and video have been used for those causes. Every successful social reform has to paint the picture of the victim that is being abused. So we have to do the same too. But we've also established data that really backs up the use of these images. We've done studies. The Canadian Center for Bioethical Reform has done studies. We've done our own study recently where we surveyed U.S. adults to ask their opinions on abortion and compared their answers when they were seeing victim imagery while taking that survey versus non-victim imagery. And the difference is beyond any statistical doubt that the use of victim imagery has a significant effect on changing people's minds on the issue of abortion, even without all that's without coupling it with any effective conversational skill, which we also believe in. But just using the images themselves turns people off to abortion, repels them from using or from supporting abortion just by seeing the image of the victim that we're trying to humanize as the pro-life movement.
Yeah, I was reading through that report. There were some fascinating findings in there from this research that you guys did. One that struck me is there was a question that, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but it wanted to know the perception of pro-life people, or how you felt towards pro-life people after viewing these images. And if I remember correctly, it was the pro-life people, the people who had identified as pro-life that reported having the most negative feelings. People who identified as pro-choice after they saw it didn't have as negative feelings. I thought that was really interesting. Do you think that's because as pro-life people, we've kind of been conditioned to say, no, we shouldn't show those images. So why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it is really interesting. Like the people who had the strongest, so we basically asked a question. We're like, hey, how would you feel about a pro-life person who's using these images as a form of activism? And for people that were exposed to this victim imagery, the very strong pro-choice people still had the most negative feelings towards pro-lifers. But the second most negative group with the strongest negative feelings were actually strong pro-lifers who were saying that about other pro-life people. That what was interesting is the group that was the least upset about the use of images were the people that were in the middle, the moderate people on the issue of abortion, people that were uncertain about what they thought, or people who thought it was just a necessary evil and they didn't personally like abortion necessarily, which is exactly who we're targeting with these images. So the fact that they were the least upset is very interesting to us. But yeah, why are pro-life people had such a strong negative reaction to the use of images? I think, yeah, we have a perception that is not backed up by data that the use of images turns people off to the pro-life movement. We think that if we go out and use these, we're going to look like we're mean, or we hate somebody, or whatever it might be. And if we use these images, people aren't going to listen to the pro-life position. And that's just not backed up by any research. There's never been any research to support that. We have done research that debunks that, and we have the historical case from other social reform movements that back up our position as well. I also think that, perhaps some pro-life people are just like, I get that it works. I just am not comfortable doing it myself. And I get that too, because no one wants to. I don't enjoy going out and using images. I wish there was a better way to change people's minds on this issue, because I would much rather do something else than this. But until I can be shown a more effective way to change public opinion at a mass scale in such a simple way, then I feel like I not only can use these images, but I have an obligation to use these images because they're so effective at changing hearts and minds on the issue.
Mm-hmm. I think as pro-lifers, we have rightly brought abortion-minded women into the discussion and want to make sure, we understand her and her needs and why she's even considering abortion. But I think sometimes we've done that at the expense of humanizing the unborn. And almost we don't talk about the unborn enough because we are focused on the woman and meeting her needs, which again is important. But I wonder if, I think we've maybe done that at the expense of, we've got to show the other side the humanity of the unborn for them to truly care about this enough to act.
Yeah, like you're saying, we absolutely have an obligation to the woman in the situation. But the reason that abortion is legal is not because women haven't gotten enough support. It's because people don't understand the humanity of the unborn. If we actually want to see abortion restricted in significant ways and ultimately unthinkable and illegal in the United States, then it's not enough just to provide material resources to the woman. We also need to turn people off to abortion. We also need to show the immorality of killing and of violence. And you can only do that if you're able to humanize the unborn, because the abortion industry thrives through anonymity. By keeping the victim of abortion anonymous and secret and dehumanized as a clump of cells or medical waste or pregnancy tissue, whatever they want to call it, as long as they're able to dehumanize the victim, then the abortion industry is going to thrive. By using images, we're not trying to go for shock value or anything like that. What we're trying to do is show for the first time for some people that the unborn are human beings, that they have faces like us, that they look like us, that they feel pain like we do. All these things are necessary to bring humanity to the victim, to ultimately bring about societal change on this issue.
Mm-hmm. One of the arguments I've heard against using imagery is that, people don't believe that they're real images, or they think it's fake. Have you guys encountered that, and how do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think so. We've had, between our group and the two groups that we work closely with, Create Equal and CCBR, we've probably talked to 250,000 people and have used images as a core part of that over the past several years. And I can recall personally, maybe twice anyone's ever said that to me, or has even questioned it, even hey, are these real? Where'd you get these from? Something like that. I think, is there a chance that that's going to increase in the future as AI develops more and we're able to produce images like that and everything more easily? Perhaps. But I think that it's not something that we're observing happening at all. We're actually using these images. And even if it does happen, I think it's very easy to be like, okay, if this image were real, how would that make you feel about abortion? Because the reason people want an image to be fake, if they're going to accuse you of having a fake image, the reason they want that to be fake is because they're so repulsed by what abortion has done to this child that they can't imagine it being real. So if you ask, well, what if it were real? How would you feel? What would you think about abortion? Then you can break through that reaction, that initial reaction, and really get to the heart of the issue, which is they're repulsed by abortion, which is the exact intent of using these images, is to turn people off to this procedure.
Mm-hmm. You've talked about showing images on a mass scale in order to change public opinion on a mass scale. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? Do you run public awareness campaigns? Talk to us about how you use the images.
Yeah. So I think we have a responsibility to use the images responsibly, because our goal is, like I said earlier, is not to bring a shock value or to further dehumanize these unborn children as a tool or a prop in a political campaign or anything. So the images that we use are intentionally picked in an effort to bring humanity to the unborn, to almost bring dignity back to this child who was treated with such little dignity during his or her short life. So we are very careful about the images that we use. And then the distribution of those, it ranges from going out on sidewalks and having these images on 3x4 A-frames and talking to people as they walk by, using roadside banners. We're using mailers where we're actually mailing images with stories of these children and the violence that was committed against them being explained to people. I think one creative way is Teresa Bukovac from the Progressive Anti-Abortion Uprising is running for president federally so that she can air TV ads in markets like New York City that tell the story of, in particular, the justice for the five children that were found in the DC area a couple of years ago. So there's lots of ways to distribute these. And I think the thing is that there's no more affordable and scalable way to effectuate so much mind change than the use of these images. It's so cheap to go out and just do activism out with these images. Anyone's able to do it, whereas other messaging and tactics usually are more cumbersome, more expensive too. So.
Yeah, we had Teresa on an episode several weeks ago, and she said something that was one of the first times I really wrestled with. Oh, okay, that's a compelling argument for using these images, because I had always just kind of been in this camp of like, oh, those make me uncomfortable, or maybe use them like one-on-one with people if you have their permission. But hearing her kind of campaign strategy of
Yep.
hoping to change hearts and minds through showing those images, it was really compelling. So it's given me a lot to think about. How have you guys seen this play out in the political space? So we see a lot of exit polling, public opinion polling, saying the most effective messages for changing voter minds or convincing voters is to keep the messaging focused on the woman. Um, what do you say to that? What's the role of these images in kind of political campaign space?
Yeah, I think that one, I'm not a political strategist, so everything I say, you guys take with a grain of salt. But when I think about the competing stories that are being told right now and some of the political campaigns that we've seen, I was heavily involved in Michigan and Ohio referendums that we both lost. When we look at the messages that were presented against each other, we had one message which was women are going to die if we don't pass these pro-abortion ballot measures. And they had very compelling stories of women actually being interviewed and telling their stories and giving their testimonies about how their life was in danger. They were a victim of sexual assault or whatever it might have been. These very gut-wrenching experiences that these women had to go through. If we focus solely on the experience of the woman, I think we're going to lose every time because we don't have as compelling of a story necessarily as they can package and mass produce like that. Because our primary reason that we're against abortion, the number one reason that we think abortion is wrong, is not necessarily because it is dangerous for a woman or it has negative effects for a woman. There are a lot of procedures and a lot of things in the world that are dangerous for women and men. But the reason why abortion is so significantly different is because it intentionally kills another human being every time it is successfully performed. And when we hold back on that victim, when we lead with other things that are on the periphery of the issue, like parental consent or health and safety for abortion clinics, we're granting that abortion should be legal. We're granting that it should be available. And then we're trying to compare our story of, well, parental consent or health and safety standards for clinics to their story of women are dying in the streets if you don't pass this. It's not as compelling. But we do have a
Mm-hmm.
compelling story to tell. We do have a compelling victim to show, which is the child in this case, not to the exclusion of the woman, but in addition to the woman. And if we can bring both of those together to these arguments, we'll see more minds change. like we don't just get some people to say like, yeah, I'll vote against proposal 3 in Michigan or whatever it is by using these images. We get people to come and talk to us who are pro-choice, and within a few minutes they walk away saying they're 100% against abortion and think it should be illegal in all cases. 52% of the time this last week we did that with college students, a very hard demographic to talk to sometimes. And so like we can change minds significantly on this issue. You know, we can talk about the other issues that are on the periphery of it, but it's just the weight of the stories are not equivalent when we lead with other arguments. We have to lead with our strongest argument, our strongest victim, which is the child who is being brutally killed.
Hmm. I was even thinking about that this week. So at the time of this recording, President Trump just announced his position on a federal abortion ban, and he thinks that it should be a decision that lies with the states. And I heard that a lot this weekend at an event I was at. And the question I just kept coming back to is, if we believe that abortion is the intentional killing of an innocent human being, why would we relegate that to, oh, each state can figure that out for themselves?
Mm-hmm.
A national abortion ban, a federal abortion ban is totally justified. But most people don't see that as abortion, or don't have that understanding of abortion. So it's compelling because I can see why centering it back on that issue, showing that that is the victim in the abortion, in an abortion can impact public policy and impact how we think about where we should be legislating abortion and what type of legislation we should be putting forward.
Yeah, and I mean, we're unfortunately with President Trump's position, like it's another sign that the other side, the pro-choice, the pro-abortion side, they're consolidating and running on access to abortion, while the typical like pro-life institutions of power, like the Republican Party or the church, are doing the opposite. We're retreating from the issue of abortion. So we're almost like creating a self-defeating argument because we're saying like, hey, you know, if we run on abortion, we're going to lose. So let's not run on abortion. And then we lose, and we're saying, see, we're running too close to abortion, so we keep backing up. It's like, no, I've never seen a political campaign from the pro-life side that has actually led about the issue of abortion itself. Every other time we've always led with focus on like the woman's experience, or regulations of abortion, things like that, that again, I don't disagree with, or I don't think are invaluable or anything, but we're on pace for like a over 20 record this year if we lose the states that are coming up on the ballot this year. So I think that it's worth looking and seeing the story that we're telling, the data that we're seeing on how effective these images are. We should start using data that focuses more on the issue itself. Even if you don't use images, focus on the issue of abortion. People have a natural inclination to discomfort related to abortion. And if we don't bring that to them to help them think about that actual issue when they're voting, then we're giving up the argument to the other side to let them run whatever ads, run whatever messaging, to frame the argument however they want. And we're responding with, well, what about parental consent? And what about this or that? Those are not persuasive, divisive voting, decision-making issues, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want to hear more about your experience in this space. Specifically, one thing I hear from a lot of pro-life people is just it's discouraging to face the reality of abortion every day, especially in work that you do where you're, you know, showing images to people and having to see those images yourself. How do you keep yourself from being discouraged? What do you do to stay motivated and stay in the fight?
Yeah. I think one thing is that we maintain momentum. It's really easy to if you start like backing off and not getting as actively involved, not doing as much outreach or something, it's hard to get going again. It's hard because you're like, oh, it's going to make me uncomfortable. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. Whatever. Your whole all these lies start entering your mind. But if you're out there doing it consistently, that all goes away. And the other thing is that like it's not discouraging as much. Like it is difficult to constantly be trying to tell someone they shouldn't be able to kill other people. Like it's exhausting sometimes to have to do that. Like we shouldn't have to be fighting about this in the streets, right? This seems so apparent, so common sense. But what is encouraging is how often you're able to get people to see it in your way. The fact that we have people that we can go out and do outreach and we can walk away with dozens of mind change. We can walk away with pictures of children that are alive now because of this work that's being done. Those things are the things that you have to make sure you hang on to ultimately, because they are the motivating thing. We're seeing the change that we want to see happen. The only thing that's keeping us from seeing it actualize into real substantive protections for the unborn is, I think, in a lot of ways, just a lack of people doing things that change minds. So we just see more people out there doing it, more people willing to do hard things. It's not that it's easy, but it is absolutely worth it every single time. I just encourage people to go out and try it.
Yeah. So you're obviously based in Michigan. You guys are doing great work there. If people are not in Michigan, but they're interested in this type of work, what are some good places they can go to get more information to be able to get involved in this way?
Yeah. What's really nice is that if you have 2 or 3 other people that are willing to do some of this work with you, then you have a big enough team. So all you really need to do is you can get in touch with us at protectlifemi.org, or go to other organizations like createdequal.org or the Canadian Center for Bioethical Reform. All of our resources are available to you. You can purchase signs or images or video or handouts, whatever you want, are all available at cost so that you can go out and do this form of outreach. We have trainings, video trainings you can take. We're happy to talk to you about what it could look like in your community. We really want to see people out and doing this more. So if you're not in one of the areas that has a big active group like this, you can definitely reach out and we can work with you or connect you. Sometimes you don't even know. We have groups like this in California and Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, Canada, Florida. They're all over the place. We'll be happy to connect you guys with whoever would be helpful.
Awesome. We will post those links in the show notes. Trevor, thanks so much for being with us today. Thanks for the awesome work that you do. God bless you in that work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Dear Jane. Don't forget to subscribe. Of course, you can find us on all your podcast platforms of choice. Don't forget to follow us on X and Instagram. On behalf of Marcy Little, I'm Scott Baker. Thanks for listening.